Hey folks, welcome back for another episode of Riftbound 101. Today is episode 12, Spiritforged Calm. And this is the second in a six-part series that's going to be running from now until the new year, where I cover each one of the domains for the Spiritforged cards and how I think they're going to slot into the metagame come next set. Cards that I think are interesting, and trying to evaluate applications and relative strength and what potential they open up. Like the episode from last week, I really want to highlight that this is a speculative exercise. We always work from information that we have and what we expect will be happening with the next metagame, but there are always curveballs, and there's always cards that are going to slip through that people think are weak and ship very strong, or vice versa. And I'm also prone to mistakes. View comments on the Fury video. There are some cards that I misread and that I had to address in the comments, and I'm likely to do the same with this one for cards that I have mistakes, that I make mistakes about. So the plan for today is to, much like we talked about the Houston Regional Qualifier last weekend or the weekend prior, today I want to talk about the PPG Orlando event that ran 3 events on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I think Friday had about 240 players, Saturday about 400, and Sunday about 200 and some. And there are some, repetitive or, repeated patterns or legends that are doing well right now, and some breakout stuff from Orlando that is interesting to talk about. And I always like doing this before I do some card evals because the evaluations I'm doing are in the context of these events. And then we're going to talk about the existing Calm Legends that are in Origins and the Proving Grounds box. What do they allow as playstyles? What are the dominant ones? And then what are the new Calm Legends that are coming into that, ecosystem and in the metagame in general? And then talking about the individual cards together and assessing them. Again, for this first series, I'm not going to be assigning grades, mostly because there's not that much to grade against in terms of scale, and the metagame is likely to shift fairly radically from set to set for the first year of the game or so. So this is really about figuring out, what cards are decent, what can we do with them, followed by a couple of personal favorites of mine that I'm excited to make decks with or to include in decks that I already have. So the PPG Orlando, the Pro Play Summit that happened over the weekend, was a 3-day event. It had a 5K cash prize on Friday, 10K, and then 5K again on Sunday. And luckily enough for us, the folks at Riftdecks have managed to collate the lists for the top 8s, or actually really the top 16s at the very least, for all 3 events. And so this is the Friday event. Andrew Davale won on a Kaisa deck. And then I want to highlight Colin Kaiser's back on set in 7th position, I think. And Daniel Zeidenberg, who is going to pop up again. So a lot of folks that you might see in coming events. But one of the really interesting parts for me is 3 Kaisa, 2 Annie, 2 Yi, and 1 Set. This looks a lot like what we expected the field to be like in Houston, so it makes sense that it would look this way. And again, Colin Kaiser, who won a couple weeks back, back on set and producing results with a fraction of the budget that other people are fielding for their decks, which is always nice to see when the game is so expensive. So this was the Friday event, but fairly localized, concentrated around the legends that we've come to expect to be dominant at this point in the season. But as soon as we enter Saturday, you might notice less Yi, less Annie, less Kaisa, or about the same for Annie, and 2 MFs, Dizzy and Ali Eldrazi, who won the event. And both of these are Aurora lists, as are, I think, all but one of the Yi lists that I'm showing. So the tournament really is sort of like Kaisa and Annie, really leveraging a lot of quality red cards and some of the very specific purple cards. Colin Kaiser, top 8 again, 2 days in a row. Slightly different deck list, I'm pretty sure, and 3rd place this time. So just great results by Colin, and I'm a big fan. But Matthew was also there in the top 8 from before, and I think maybe Cody Southard. No. And then day 3, Kaisa takes it, and this time we have 2 Kaisa, 2 Annie, 2 Yi, and 2 MFs again. And shout out Mo from Tournament Sideways. I'm assuming it's the same person, unless there's another Mo, in 4th place. And this really, I think, is showcasing a shape where now what we saw at Houston, which was a lot of strong day 2 MF showings, is starting to trickle down into these, mid-sized events. Let's put them that way. So we're kind of nearing, a meta where the top 8s are really these 4 decks with, Colin Kaiser arriving on set. I'd love to see some other players make it into a top 8, but unfortunately that's what's here. And I don't count Savige from a couple weeks back because of the issues that a lot of people know from that event. So this is really what it's looking like. And Jonathan Rodriguez, no. I just wanted to see if there were any repeats. So takeaways for me from PPG Orlando, and feel free to look at, I'll link the 3 events in the description below so you can take a look at deck lists if you'd like. MF, a breakout, question mark. I think post Houston, it makes sense that we would see a lot more. This seems to have been the dominant Aurora variant, seeing as Yi can sometimes also play like a mid-range variant. But really, in this like 3-day top 8, we're talking about 4 MFs on Aurora and something like 5 Yis on Aurora, and then Kaisa and Annie. So you kind of have this like split between MF, Annie, Kaisa, Yi with some number of appearances. I think when I did the list, Yi was only at 3 because I wasn't looking at the Friday event. And then Set's just around, but it's Colin Kaiser, so I'm actually like asking myself some questions about whether or not Set is that good or it's Colin that's that good. And time will tell. But this is, to me, really important because it showcases the kind of decks that are doing well currently, and the kinds of cards that are coming into the game in February will tell us a lot about the kind of new playstyles that are going to open up for Calm. And I think starting to talk about the Calm Legends with Yi in focus is maybe the easiest point to start with. So Yi has been the dominant Calm Legend so far. Sometimes Yasuo makes it into a top 32 or a top 16, depending on mid-sized events, or if your Gale wins, you can top 64 at the regional. But that's really like the one super apparent Calm Legend that's been doing well. Ari is highly played, but rarely translates into day 2 finishes. So, Master Yi has so far produced green deck lists that really focus on defensive or large single units, and liked cards like White Flame Protector and interactive spells that are lean, but that's really been it. And then the other 4 legends have, to certain extents, played differently. So Ari tends to play more on the blue side of things, but also likes lean combat spells, your On Guards, your Disciplines, your Defies. Depending on the lists, you might see some Sona or you might see some Tasty Fey Folk. But it's really been like nominally both Yi and Ari are hold strategies for the most part. Lee Sin has been playing like a mid-range buff strategy. Unfortunately, he competes for equity in the buff archetype with both Leona and Set. And I think Leona and Lee Sin have the same issue where Set just is currently a more functional buff strategy. And so some of the, decks that placed well at Houston for Lee Sin were actually Aurora decks regardless. And so, or they played a lot of the same units that you're likely to see in the Aurora lists. So, buff units, protect them, same thing. And I'll talk about Leona really quickly because Leona, I think, has her own game plan utilizing stun units, but also nominally wants to be a lean hold strategy. So if you look at the list that got the highest placing position at Houston, which there are some controversies regarding perhaps like win trading or some issues. So I'm using that list. Maybe it's not the best performing one, but triple Zenith Blade, very much on stuns and buffs and playing a whole lot of 2 drops. And in that way, Leona and Yasuo, the Gale Winds version, are kind of playing for the same strategy, which is like field a lot of turn 1 playable units and then protect them in some way, right? So in Yasuo, you're protecting them with some movement spells, tide turners, fighter flights, and in Leona, you're protecting with face breakers and more of the green stuff. But all 4 of these decks, and the Yi as well, though there are some ramp versions of Yi, really have leaned, I think, much more on the very cheap protection and interaction and card draw that green offers, but really not so much on their core strategies. So like Yasuo doesn't really play many of his champion units or his champion spell. Leona plays a ton of her champion spell, but the units that are part of the package, like Solari Shieldbearer or Midling and Lee Sin, I'm not going to talk too much about because I'm less knowledgeable and I don't want to talk shit about a hero that might see some play. But that's kind of what green has been doing, right? It's been like the hold color, the protect your units with small spells, so like the protect the president style of play, I think has been applied for Leona, Yasuo, and Lee Sin, depending on the mood. And then Ari sometimes does some very divergent strategies that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So, what do the new legends add to the green part of the color pie, right? Because they are entirely different, to my mind, than what has come before. And I think it's super interesting that 3 of your units are nominally like gear or equipment based. So I'm going to start with Ornn. Ornn's ability is, reaction speed, add a rune, only to play gear or to use gear abilities. Obviously, equipment is gear, but not all gear is equipment. So it is foreseeable that Ornn will have a shell that is more gear-based than equipment-based, although I think he'll like equipment just the same. But it's certainly a different playstyle than what has been available for green currently. He'll allow you to move equipment manually or to play it cheaper than other heroes. And we've seen with Kai'Sa that the power of adding an unconditional rune a turn is very good. If equipment turns out to be good, Ornn will likely have a good spot in the meta. And I know there's a really stupid combo that people are trying to set up with Blue Ornn and Spellsonger, and I'll talk about the sword when we get to it. But for my money, Ornn is just kind of a good engine. And then we have Jax, and Jax competes with Lee Sin and Yi. So it'll be interesting to see if he can sort of get on top of that unconditional 2 power defensive bonus or the buffs that Lee grants. And so what you can do with Jax is sort of move your equipment around without paying runes. A lot of the equip costs are actually like 1 rune power. He lets you do it for 1 generic energy. You can either pay 1 and attach an equipment that's detached, or you can just exhaust him and attach from unit to unit. This to me entails sort of some shenanigans with like reattaching equipment or forcing opponents to trade into it and then moving it around to new units. I like Jax, but a lot like I had issues with Lucian last time. I think it's always a bit tricky to have equipment that you need to stick onto units or units that you really want to protect in case people interact with them. That being said, unlike when we were talking about red last week, green has a much better time protecting its units. And so I'm actually reasonably excited for Jax, but I'm cautious. And then I'll jump to the 3rd equipment legend for now, which is Azir. Azir to me looks really good. And for 2 reasons. So first off, his exhaust ability, pay 1 energy and exhaust to play a 2 might sand soldier to your base, but only if you played an equipment, looks like a side grade condition from Victor's generate 1 unit. And unlike Victor, he won't be able to fill out your curve at every point in the game. But what Azir does is he provides a constant flow of units for your equipment if you are casting them slightly above rate. And so things like Doran's Shield, or when we get to the scissors that are in yellow in a couple of episodes, uh, the ability to provide units for your equipment is already really strong, which is also why I think his other ability is really useful. Sand Soldiers have Weapon Masters, so when they come into play, you can equip equipment to them without paying the rune cost. So Azir functionally doesn't produce runes like Ornn, and he can't manually reattach the equipment, but he solves another part of the puzzle, which is just having bodies. And one of the important themes of today's episode is going to be giving variant grades, especially for all the cards that produce Sand Soldiers, because I think some decks won't care that much or will play them as filler. I think Azir will like the Sand Soldiers that are produced by certain cards a lot more than the rest of his gear compatriots. And lastly, we have Irelia. There's a lot of discussion, especially on the subreddit, whether Irelia or Yasuo will helm better decks. Irelia looks a lot more rune hungry. So when you choose a friendly unit, you can exhaust Blade Dancer, pay 1 rune to ready that unit. And if you conquer, you can pay 1 to ready Irelia. So to me, this looks a lot like a double conquer sort of strategy, and this deck will be very rune hungry. There's a high likelihood that the green and purple seals will see a lot of play in this deck. This is like the opposite of the conservation of resources that you see across all 3 of the other legends. But what you get for it is the capacity to conquer and take back units by readying. So you send in a unit, you conquer, then you target it for whatever reason. You can ready it by paying a rune and drag it back to base. The reason to do so can vary a lot, but just having the flexibility to do that is great. And obviously, if you're playing like ganking units, you can go from one battlefield to another. This can get pretty scary with battlefields like Windswept Hillock, or if you're on units that have ganking already. And purple is also getting more counterspells this set, so there will be a lot of even cheaper and more flexible versions of cards to play that I think Yasuo is one of those decks that's been like in the top like half of the legends, but below the tiers that are seeing a lot of competitive wins. And I think it's mostly a question of when the package is really going to fit together. So I can't tell you which version of this is going to be good, but I like purple green as a color combination a lot. So that'll factor into some of the grades. Okay, so we'll move on to the Spiritforged Calm Cards. As usual, I swapped to the client, so let's do that now. All right, so this is just a pickup after last week's episode. We're going to go through these sequentially. So we're going to go through commons, uncommons, rares, epics, and finally I'm going to move on to the legend signature spells, which I will have to rediscuss when I get to the other half of these colors. But I think this is a useful way to sort of have gradients of power. And yeah, let's just get started. So Desert's Call, 2 energy, repeat for another 2 energy, and you put a 2 Might Sand Soldier unit token into play. I think this card is fine, if not exciting, in a lot of decks. A 2 Might unit that is vanilla is slightly underrate. However, the flexibility of being able to have 2 is good modality for the spell, and it might see some play just for that. Now in Azir, I think this is actually a card that you're going to like a lot. You're definitely going to want a 3 set of these because it opens up two mana plays or 2 energy plays, even if you don't have resources. And later in the game, it will be likely that you draw this, play it for 4, get 2 units, equip weapons to them, and then if you can move them or do anything with them, you can get a lot of value. So Desert's Call is one of those modal cards that I was warning about, where I think this card is fine outside of Azir and pretty good going to great inside of his deck, for sure. Then we have Disarming Rake, 2 Might, 3 cost, burn 1 rune. When you play me, you may kill a gear. So this unit looks pretty bad to me. On rate, 2 Might for 3 and a burn is really rough. Burning a rune that early is kind of tough. And especially at the point in the game where you will play him, if you're just playing him on curve, you're often going to kill a very small piece of gear or equipment, which is not bad. I think this is a sideboard card for like maybe green purple, where you don't get access to better gear removal. I don't like it that much otherwise. Other options would be to play this in, I don't know, like jacks to equip it with stuff. But I feel like there's just better options, unfortunately, for disarming rake, unless I'm forgetting something. Doran's Shield. This is one of your like brick and mortar, super cheap pieces of gear. 1 might for 1 energy. You equip it for 1 calm rune, and it has tank. Tank is not an inconsequential keyword in some matchups, especially when you're green. Will allow you to protect specific units, so don't discount it that much. I think a 1 might, 1 cost shield is not that good. Again, in most decks, because when you're on 2 energy, you're going to play this and not really want to burn the energy, and you're not going to have anything to equip it to. In Azir, this card is amazing. It goes from being like kind of bad to really good because it allows you to play the shield and then play Azir's ability and equip it automatically, which means that you have a functional turn 1 3 might tank unit that you can then send into a battlefield. That's pretty great. I'm happy to play that, any day of the week when I'm playing Azir. And, maybe full disclosure, I'm planning on playing Azir when the new set launches, so that is factoring into how much I've been looking at like green and yellow equipment. Feral Strength is our 4th card. So it's a reaction, +2 to unit for 2, and you can repeat it. So, kind of like a less lean on guard. And I think, well, less lean because you're paying 2 for 2, but you can get 4 for 4. You're going to like this in some decks where you don't mind having that spare energy to play with. And the 2 might is available on offense and defense. It's reaction speed. I don't dislike it. I think it's fine. Like a lot of the stuff we were talking about last week, it's really going to come down to breakpoints. But I will say that 1 energy cost is not inconsequential. Cards tend to live and die by their energy cards at low energy points. Really, like the difference between 1 and 2 energy is very high. And we'll talk about it when we get to like Purple Aurelia or Vex. The difference between 1 and 2 effectively will become the difference between 0 or 1, and 0 cost abilities are going to be very valuable for that deck. I don't dislike it. I just don't think it has like spectacular upside compared to On Guard, which I like a lot because of the way you can trigger very cheap draw on Dreaming Tree, for example. It's not bad. Again, a question of whether or not you want to play it, but I think more likely no than yes. Okay, up next we have Guardian of the Passage, 6 might for 6 energy. When I hold, you may return a unit or gear from your trash to your hand. I'm not really in for this card. I feel like it's it's on rate, I guess, 6 might for 6, but you would rather hold with small units that you can protect rather than play large green units. This is maybe a card for Yi more than it is for anything else. There are a lot of like equipment units going around, and I think, for example, playing this on 6 and having to equip it and having to hold with it, and really you're not really getting a lot of offensive value out of this. It's okay, but I just don't think that this is where green wants to be with any of its champions, except for maybe Yi. And I feel like Yi has better things to do than to play Guardian of the Passage. This will see homes in like some mid-range lists, I feel like, but that's about it. Lonely Poro. 2 might for 2 energy. Death Knell. If I died alone, draw 1. Solid. Green is already the color that likes the Poro package. You have Stalwart, you have Poro Herder. I'm sure that you're gonna like having a small Poro, side theme in a lot of green decks. I feel like this is the kind of card that Yasuo likes, a card that you can push into a battlefield early on. For people who don't know, the sort of like standard pattern for the current more successful Yasuo decks is to play a 2-drop, and then the next turn is to play another 2-drop, move your first one, and then push the second one to a battlefield, accepting that you will lose one or the other. And Lonely Poro is a bit like Clockwork Keeper, but it doesn't burn you a rune to draw a card. So this to me is like medium, but you're gonna like it in a lot of lists that really want to get on point, and you're gonna like it more with Poro lists that like buffs. So probably in like Leona, Lonely Poro has a bit more of a home. It's fine. It's like a 2-drop that will conditionally draw you a card. That's great. And you do like it in Yi. It has the like if I died alone synergy. And one thing I'll be talking about with one of the rares later is this also likes hook. So if you jam it somewhere and then you hook it, you can get the point, and then you can draw the card and also get the the unit off of the hook. So fine unit, but nothing fantastic here, which has really been the theme of green so far. Is like everything is okay. Some stuff is better for now. Navori Scout, 4 might, 4 cost, deflect. This is one of the cards that I think is maybe a bit underrated right now. I think people are looking at this and saying like, well, what's the point of having like a very stock 4-cost unit that doesn't like overpower your opponents? Well, the equity of deflect is high, and Kaisa is still like dominant, and Ezreal's also coming into the mix next set. So there are going to be like decks that really want to target your creatures immediately, and having cheap access to cheap deflect is not inconsequential, especially in colors that can protect. So Kiana's way better than this, but Kiana also burns a rune, and Navori Scout I think is going to be reasonably useful and is going to be one of those units that you really like sticking equipment on, because it will punish your opponents for trying to interact. So this is really like, I prefer my equipment wearers to have deflect over weapon master, as I think that's going to punish the opponent a little bit more. Ribbon Dancer, when I move to a battlefield, give another unit +1 this turn for 3. I do not think that this card is good. 3-cost cards are a bit strange, especially in decks that can't utilize that mana immediately or that energy immediately in profitable ways. You kind of don't want to be second right now in general. This is not a card that you can play on turn 1 easily. It's not a card that you can play on turn 2 easily, and it dies to removal that is undercosted. You need 2 units to get equity out of this, and you need to move it into a battlefield, which means you're putting it at risk for battlefield removal or whatever is getting there. So I'm mixed on it. I might be wrong. Its home is clearly in Irelia or in Yasuo, but I just think those decks want different kinds of cards, and that's really what it's about for me. Royal Entourage, 4 might, 3 energy, burn 1 calm rune, and when you play me, ready or exhaust a legend. Now we're talking. I think Royal Entourage is going to do some interesting stuff with cards like Yasuo and Irelia and Azir. Basically, all of the cards that like to exhaust fairly consistently to use their effects. Royal Entourage is going to give you some interesting combinations. Lee Sin might see some play with this. And the other part that I like about this is we're finally getting into cards that have more might than they do cost. So Royal Entourage, for example, is a card that on a really dead hand, if I'm going second and I draw this, I am happy playing a 4 might unit that sets me back 1 rune to sort of push into a battlefield on turn 2. So I like Royal Entourage. Again, it's a brick and mortar card, but I think it's going to have some interesting applications, and it's going to allow some more interesting pop-off turns with cards like Irelia and Azir in particular. for my money. Thwonk. So stun attacking unit as an action for 2 energy, and you repeat for 2. This card is essential, I think, for Leona. Leona's been looking for more, really useful cards that can stun. You can't stun on attack, but you can stun on defense. Although you could theoretically stun your own unit to just get value. I'm not like the biggest fan of that, but you can do it. And the fact that it can scale into a double stun is very, very good. Leona, I don't think exhausts. I don't have my Leona next to me right now to look. So if that's the case, this becomes like a stun 2, give 2 buffs. That's a great card in that home. Now, the question is, do you like this in other decks that are not Leona? That's a bit more mitigated. I think a lot of the other decks are going to be pretty tight up on slots. And, if this is like stunning a 2 might or a 3 might unit, would you rather have something like Discipline? Probably. But this can really push back some big units. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this as like a one of in certain lists. And in Leona, you're probably going to see it go up to 2 or 3, depending on how spell heavy that deck wants to be. But I do like it there. And it doesn't burn runes, which is, really not something to discount when you're evaluating cards. And then we move into our uncommon cards. So Apprentice Smith, 2 might for 2 energy. When I move, reveal the top card of your main deck. If it's a gear, draw it. Otherwise, recycle it. It's on rate. It will fish for equipment, but it will not let you see other units. This card, I think, really is like an Ornn and Jax staple. Azir, I'm not sure how much Azir hates his non-equipment cards, but this is the card that's going to have a lot of homes in all the equipment stuff and basically be unplayed outside of it, because you don't get card selection, really. You just get to either draw the gear or recycle it. So it's like a 2 cost that sometimes draws you a card, and otherwise will recycle stuff. Cycling bad cards is not nothing, but if you compare this to something like Lonely Poro or the Clockwork, Clockwork Keeper, which is, that one does burn a rune, and the other ones have like some nasty Poro wants to die to draw cards. So it's not like this doesn't have a cost. So it's like a 2 might for 2 that sometimes draws you cards. Again, it's in that, like, it's fine, but sometimes I feel like I just want like a stalwart Poro instead of this. Brutalizer. 2 might for 2 energy for 1 might, 1 equip. If this was attached to me this turn, I have an additional 2 might. This is a Jax card through and through. I think Azir just wants maybe like 1 or 2 copies. You have to be pretty proactive with it, and generating Sand Soldiers that are not hasted or aren't accelerated is going to be pretty weird, and generally they're not. So I feel like Jax will like moving this around for a functional like 3 cost might buff, which you can then like prioritize however you want. But outside of that, I think it's got a pretty limited home, and the fact that it is only on the turn when you equipped it or you attached it is fairly limiting. But maybe there are some combos that you can do with like Green Azir, shooting him into like a battlefield like at action speed and getting this equipped onto him. It's fine, and I think its playability in Azir in particular is going to depend on how much 2 and 1 cost equipment you have access to, which is how you generate your Sand Soldiers most of the time. Otherwise, I think there are some better equipment. There's better equipment lying around there. Emperor's Divide. So 2 energy, action speed, and you can hide it. Move any number of friendly units at a battlefield to their base. I like this a lot. We've been seeing a lot of fight or flight in green deck, in purple decks, and particularly in Yasuo and Annie, but also in MF sometimes. I think it doesn't have the modality of pushing back enemy units, but it can protect yours. And especially for decks like Azir or Jax that don't necessarily need to hold, I think having a couple copies of this is going to be really useful. I just like it a lot. You can also hide it sometimes, which will, it will select the battlefield that you're using it. You're using it at, but it's a cheap spell and it can really protect against some pretty gnarly removal and also like duck you out of some combats that you don't want to take. And the fact that it moves multiple units really incentivizes some pretty heavy hold strategies where you're like splitting up a lot of units to hold a point and you can bring them back out and send them back in. I also think Leona likes this card somewhat because you can pull out your champion Leona and then use it again next turn to restun and retake. So I like Emperor's Divide a lot. I think it's a card that's going to see a lot of play. So yeah. Legion Quartermaster, 4 might for 3. As initial cost to play me, return a friendly gear to its owner's hand. What gear do you want to replay in green and like whatever he's in, green orange, green yellow? You have to like it has to be good to return the gear to your hand instead of playing it. So, like right next to him you have Poro Snacks. I think like Poro Snacks is maybe one of the imagine you have a Poro Snacks turn, right? So you play that on one, you draw, then you play Legion Quartermaster the next turn. You went down a rune, you go up to 3. You play Quartermaster again. You're now up a card. The Poro Snacks is back in your hand, and you can replay it again. That's fine. 3 might for 4 is, I think, the 4 might for 3 is the interesting part of this. Again, these cards are effectively like power crept. Like it's just wielder, right? Like I'm not going crazy. It's just better wielder. And wielder sees play, so this card will see play, and it will see more play if you can utilize the gear. But even if you can't, it might be sufficient to just have like a 4 might 3 cost unit. So ironically, this card just might be, like successful because of its might to power cost, and it dies less to removal. This is like the one big weakness that Wheeler of Water has. Is you can get blasted when you're at a battlefield and you're not attacking or defending. Legion Quartermaster is going to require a bit more commitment than just like a stray hex tech. Yeah, I think this card's solid. Ironically, you're going to get more value out of it with the gear, but you might just play it in decks that don't even care about the gear. Not so fast. So 2 energy, burn 1 calm rune, reaction, counter an enemy spell or ability that chooses a friendly unit or gear. Listen, this card's going to be good. Windwall saw play and Mystic Reversal see play, and they're incredibly taxing on your runes. This card cannot, I would need to do a chart for what counters hit what ranges of cards. You can't like cancel Time Warp with this or Divine Judgment, but you're gonna be able to get around a lot of removal. I actually am not sure that this hits Falling Star or Acathian Rain because those spells generate the reflexive triggers that target. I don't know if they themselves target. So that's something to check into, and I don't want to make a claim either way. I do think I like this. 1 energy more to not have the restriction on cost, but it's something that targets your units. Most stuff that you want to counter is going to target your units. You're reasonably happy with this. I think this is probably like something that will maybe have a 1 of in the deck and then sit in the sideboard for decks that really want to target you. Obviously, this isn't going to do a lot if your opponent's playing like an aggressive Darius list that just fields units or is just like playing a 0 and dropping equipments. So you don't want a dead card. Having like a 1 of dead card in your deck is fine, but you definitely don't want to like main deck 3 of them and then run into a matchup where this does nothing and you double draw it. So, keep that in mind. Poro Snacks. So Poro Snacks effectively has like repeat, but at like a delay. So when you play it, you draw 1. It burns a rune effectively. It's like burning a rune for one draw, and then you kill it to draw again. I like Poro Snacks. I mean, we just saw Legion Quartermaster, so obviously there is a home for this kind of stuff. The reason why I like Poro Snacks is that much like Scrap Heap, you're gonna be happy like having this in your deck, and then if you draw it late, it's not like completely dead. I actually like it more late, and you probably like you like mulligan it pretty aggressively in game one, unless there is like a gear reason. That being said, if you're playing Ornn, all of a sudden the ability itself doesn't really cost anything. So it's like one energy draw, and then the activate becomes one energy, kill me and draw. In Ornn, you're gonna like this a lot. Like 2 energy, draw 2 in 2 actions. It's like fine. It uses up your Ornn ability for certain, but it's good card advantage. Yeah, like I like it, but I like it for a very small range of decks. Like I don't know if I would play this in Azir or in Yasuo, where like discarding a scrap heap is better than playing this. So yeah, that's my. It's like the card that it is competing with for me is scrap heap, and scrap heap is like zero draw one. So take that as well. Simian Ancestor, 5 might, 5 cost, 1 calm rune when you buff me, ready me. I do not think this card is good. Its homes are what? Lee Sin? That's really what it wants to be in. So in Lee Sin, it's a 6 might, 6 power accelerated. Sorry, 6 energy cost, 1 rune for 6 might ready. It's 2 cheaper than Tasty Fey Folk, but you don't get any of the ability on defense. I think it's kind of mediocre. Yeah. I don't know. Like maybe there's a case for you play this in like a lead deck and then you buff it, or you're in Leona and you stun something and then it readies and you shoot it in. I just feel like it's a lot of hoops to jump through for a card that is somewhat, finely costed but not interesting. Like I'm paying 2 more and burning a rune to get 1 more power than Legion Quartermaster, and it's ready. I just do not feel like that's going to do a lot for me. Now, Stellacorn Herder is a card I can get behind. 3 might for 4 energy, and when you move, you draw 1. This is just great. What do you want me to tell you? It's under might, sure, but it will draw at least 1 card, and it requires some pretty immediate engagement from opponents. You probably don't play it on 4 energy unless you're against a deck that is lacking in base interaction. If you're playing this in Yasuo or Aurelia, you can probably just keep moving it around and getting a lot of cards. But even in just like a regular deck, a 3 might draw 1 for 4 if it ever survives. Like I think I'm into this pretty heavily. It's under might, so you have to play it in decks where you can actually like buff its power. But you're gonna be pretty happy to do that, and then you can like ride the wind this back to base or something during an opponent's turn and like recycle a card by default. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this. I like it a lot. My guinea pig is running around. He's excited because it's dinner time soon. Aphelios, Exalted. So now we're moving into the rares. There's not going to be a ton of these more left. 4 might for 4 energy, burn a rune. When you attach an equipment to me, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Ready 2 runes, channel 1 rune exhausted, buff a friendly unit. This card is like married to Jax. It's probably going to be played a fair amount in Ornn as well, and I think that's about it. It doesn't really do what you want Azir's units to do, which is like just like automatically equip weapons to themselves, but effectively turning Jax's ability to equip runes to him. Readying runes is kind of like a micro Targon's Peak. Channeling runes exhausted is great, and buffing a friendly unit is also great. Like you play this on 4, and you haven't gotten, you know, a chance to like move your Doran's shield, you equip it with Jax, and like I just want to make sure I'm not talking shit. Jax's ability, you already have to have it detached to do that, but so like if it's detached, it's like 5 cost and burn a rune for a 6 power unit because you're getting whatever equipment you had on it, let's say like a Doran's, plus a buff. And then next turn you can just like channel runes or ready them by equipping more stuff on it. Aphelios to me really looks like he wants to be in those. He's like a body for the decks that really want bodies to equip units onto. Azir already has the bodies. What he wants is good equipment. So I like him for those two decks. Not really anywhere else. But you know, there's an asterisk that if there's enough powerful equipment running around that people just play equipment, period, he might be good enough to like make it into some more stock lists. That's my take. And then Azir Ascendant, my boy. I've been waiting for all of, you know, the couple months I've been playing the game to have Azir, but I played a ton of Azir in Legends of Runeterra, so I'm super happy to see him here. He's not the same, but I love him anyways. 6 might for 6 energy and 1 calm rune is. I mean, I just made some comments about like Simian Ancestor not being super exciting for like 1 power, 1 energy less. Normally, I would say the same thing about Azir. But you can burn an additional rune as an action to choose a unit, and you can move it. You can move Azir to that unit's location and it to its location, and if it's equipped, you can transfer equipment. Almost always, you will have Sand Soldiers with equipment ready to move on to this guy, which means you can kind of sit in a Sand Soldier somewhere at a like a battlefield and just keep him back. And if somebody moves in, your action, you know, can be to move him in, and you move him in for 0 energy. You do burn a rune, but that would be what you'd be paying to equip the weapon anyways. And this makes Azir read to me sort of like a defensive Yasuo. Instead of moving him in to blast something on attack, you can move him in to defend, and you can also move him out of a battlefield to dodge removal. But if he was already holding there, you can only do it once a turn, and so that means you're gonna want to play some very strange game plans with your Sand Soldiers being split between your battlefields and base, so you can move him around. He's probably not like a 3 of. You don't want to multiple draw this when you don't have Sand Soldiers, but to have one of these to threaten, I think is pretty interesting. So he's likely to be in the same spot as Green Yasuo, which is like 1 in the champ zone or 1 in the deck, maybe 2, but I do like him for what he does, even though he is not like he's sitting at that 6 might level, which I always find frustrating because of the existence of Falling Star. But you know, you can protect him in green a little bit more. Guardian Angel. So 2 energy, 1 might. If a unit would die, kill Guardian Angel, heal, exhaust, and recall me. Okay, so Guardian Angel is kind of like Zonia. It requires, you know, that it be destroyed. It won't, like, you need to equip it for it to really shine compared to Zonia's, which can just sit in base, and then you can play a unit out on top of it. That being said, I don't dislike playing Guardian Angel into, like, say you're on 3 energy, you're going second. You play Guardian Angel, you generate a Sand Soldier, auto equips. You have a 3 might unit that has to be killed once and then comes back as a 2 cost unit. If you're ever like on Sand Soldiers and you have like detached equipment, you equip this, it dies, it comes back. You can equip. Oh no, it just heals. It doesn't bring it back. So heal, exhaust, and recall me. So it doesn't like trigger movements and it doesn't trigger like come into play effects. But you can just protect your unit. I mean, Azir is gonna love this, almost certainly. The question is, what decks want this over Zonia's? And the answer is probably all 3 of the equipment decks want this over Zonia's, because you can equip it and move it around. But I feel like you're probably not going to move it around all that much. So this is good. I was going to say solid, but I think this is just good. And there is a case that you may be playing a deck where you are in such a strong protect the president style of play that you can play like multiple Guardian Angels and Zonias. I don't know if we're there yet, but the blue Ornn is certainly pushing that kind of thinking for a lot of people. So, this can really like make something stick to the board for sure. And unlike Zonia's, it gives a +1, so sometimes that'll be an interesting breakpoint. Heart of Dark Ice. 3 energy, 1 calm rune, exhaust, give a unit +3 might this turn. So it's a green gear. You don't want to replay it, so you don't want this for the Legion Quartermaster. It's like it's an Ornn card. You have to use this on an open neutral state, so you can't use it at battlefields really. And then you like buff something and push it in. But you do get that buff every turn after you get the 3. I don't know how good this is. If you use this twice and you've gotten 6 might out of a 3 cost investment, you're going to be happy. So it can't be terrible. Especially if you play it like on turn 1 and then you're playing like accelerated units, or you're in Yasuo and you're pushing stuff forward. But it can't be reactive like Mask of Foresight. So it's really like a proactive Mask of Foresight that gives +3 instead of +1. I think I would play it exactly where I play Mask of Foresight now in Yasuo, more than I would in Ornn. And I would play it as a 1-of, and that would be it. And Ornn can also play it probably as a 1-of and cover its rune cost. And that's kind of it. I think outside of that, I would never play this. But, such is life. Janna, 3 might, 3 energy, 1 calm rune, reaction. When you play me, heal your units here, then move an enemy out, unit from here to base. Okay. This is going to definitely help against some of the sequential spell matchups, especially if you're on ward units. I would not be surprised if Leona really loves this. Yasuo and Irelia definitely will as well. Playing this and saving like Stellacorn Herder also like nets you back a card if anybody is like putting in like two damage pings or something with like Ornn's Bellow. Ornn's Bellow is like 1, but any of the 2 cost pings. And sometimes you'll just play this as a reaction and like swing a combat. We've seen Shen have some like really good situations where like an opponent removes your unit and your reaction to the removal going on the stack is just playing Shen. She's not as defensively good as Shen by himself, but she will produce some similar board states. And in a deck where you can play both Shen and Janna, you can reasonably start playing like some really reactive units. I like this card, and the question is like how many of them do you run it and what decks do you run it in? I think the more you have units that you're really keen on protecting, the more you play it. But this might be like a reasonable sideboard card in most green decks, if we're being honest. And this card like really, really likes units at 5 or 7 might that require like the commitment of either 2 spells or the overcommitment of something like Acathian Rain on very big units, or like if you have a 5 might unit, the opponent looks at it and is like, oh man, I don't want to like Falling Star this because I'm wasting a little bit of damage, but maybe I have to. So maybe they commit like a Hex Tech or a Void Seeker, and then you play Janna in response to whatever is the second spell. Yeah, you're like super happy with Janna in general, and she's lean enough that you're going to be happy playing her. Just be careful with that 1 rune burn. Again, Green Seal's looking a lot more interesting this set than they were last one. And then we move into the epics. The last couple of cards, theoretically the ones that are supposed to be the strongest. So now we have Jax. Jax, 5 might, 5 energy, 1 rune burn, but has deflect. If that was literally the only keyword on this Jax, I think I would be happy enough playing it, given how removal works. But each equipment in your hand has quick draw, which is reaction when you play it, attach it to a unit you control. So he burns a rune, but he makes all of your subsequent equipment not burn runes to equip to him or to other units. I like Jax Unmatched a lot. The one thing he can't do is he can't like accelerate into a battlefield, which oftentimes you do want. But setting him onto a battlefield with like a big equipment, like Guardian Angel, for example, and having like a 6 cost unit that also has deflect, requires multiple commitments. I like Jax Unmatched quite a lot, and obviously you will play him in the Jax deck. He may in fact also be playable in Ornn because of the deflect if you're going into a hyper deflect kind of shell. I've been on the receiving end of some matches where I played set at skirmishes and I saw how frustrated people were playing into Kiana and Fiora. Deflect is no joke, and I think that's why I rate like targeted removal a bit lower than I did last set. I like him quite a lot. Um, oh, sorry, that was not the epic. That's the rare because that's the showcase. So we're still in the rares, but still. Needlessly large Yordle. Okay, time for the meme. 10 energy, 3 green runes, 5 might. It has shield 5, tank, and it costs less to play for each point you scored from holding this turn. So the ultimate like smackdown with this unit is you play Yasuo. On turn 1, you play a 2-drop. On turn 2, you play another 2-drop. You push both of them into battlefields. Your opponent does nothing to respond. You can then play a 6-cost, 1 energy, 5 might, shield 5 Yordle. And that's the best case scenario. And otherwise, this card is really bad. And also, it dies to Falling Star, unlike a card like the Jax that's next to it at 5 energy. Sometimes the cards don't look good to me, and this is certainly a case. I wish Needlessly Large Yordle was good, but I just don't see it. I think this card is a meme, and it's going to have some matches where you feel like this is absolutely crushing your opponent if you're playing into like a super on the ground unit heavy strategy that just does nothing to you and also can't take battlefield for some reason. Otherwise, I'm not really into it. Sterak's Gauge, 3 might, 3 cost, quick draw for 2. So it basically covers its own, like half of its energy cost by auto equipping itself. It always has auto equip. Does that matter? Are you using this with the Quartermaster to bring it back to your hand? It's the first equipment we've seen that gives 3 might, and I think that's going to be meaningful in some decks. I feel like the fact that it can't, like, this is not a reaction card, and it's pretty heavy on the rune cost. So I guess the answer is like you play this in Ornn and in Jax only, and that's kind of it. I actually think I prefer this in Ornn to like offset the rune cost. Man, a 3-cost card with 2 runes is no joke. Like, you're playing this early enough that it's going to set you back a full turn of runes. It's pretty brutal. So what's the upside, right? You play a 2-drop. Then next turn you play Sterak's Gauge and you push your 2-drop, like, Mighty Poro, or like Stalwart Poro into a battle. You put it. I say push. I shouldn't say push. You just move it into an open battlefield, and it stays there as a 5-cost with, or 5 might and then shield +1, so 6 on defense. Yeah, this feels like an Ornn card, but not one that I'm happy to play necessarily. So yeah, not my jam. I think I'm more on the cheap equipment than I am on the expensive equipment, or the expensive equipment better like really wow me. Irelia Fervent. So 4 and deflect. This is now the 3rd deflect unit we've seen, if not more, inside of this one page. And when you choose Already Me, give me +1 this turn. So in base, it's a 4-cost. And if you move this with like Yasuo, it becomes a 5 power deflect. And otherwise, if you choose it with the spell, it'll get +1. And if you play something like Discipline, it'll get +3, or On Guard +3. And if you're playing something like Ride the Wind, it'll also get +2. Aurelia is super flexible. It does get hammered in base, like a lot of things. You can Singularity it, or you can like Falling Star it. And at 5 cost, your opponent's like reasonably like likely to do that. But it having innate deflect is pretty brutal. This forces opponents to constantly commit removal into a deflect body that you can then buff because you're in the colors that buff it at reaction speed. By buff, I mean like raise its might. Yeah, I think it's gonna be good. I have some questions about whether or not Purple Aurelia is better in the Aurelia deck specifically, or whether this is. But this is like a really solid green unit that you're likely to want to play into a lot of decks, in a lot of decks. And this is one of the cards that I was like, this card is really going to make some people pissed off to play targeted removal, because you're going to be on like very specific trades where you're not going to be able to really interact with this profitably. If you sit this at like a dreaming tree, your opponent looks at this and is like, am I about to like commit removal into something that gets buffs and also gets to draw cards? Which is it's intense. That's for sure. I like Aurelia Fervent a lot. I think this is one of the earliest cards that I saw where I was kind of wowed. You know, prepare your wallets. We have Orin Blacksmith. We're nearing the end of these, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, only like 3 more cards. Orin Blacksmith, 5 might, 5 energy, 1 calm rune. When you play me or I hold, look at the top 4 cards of your main deck. You may reveal gear from among them, draw it, then recycle the rest. Listen, Orin likes drawing equipment because he can play it with lesson costs, and getting to do that when you hold is really good. If you hold once with Orin, are you reasonably happy? Like if it's a 5 might 4/5 that draws you 2 equipment, I think you're pretty happy, and it'll self-select. Unlike the smaller blacksmith that I saw at 2, where you only look at like the first card and you recycle it, I think Ornn giving you some selection between equipments is also really useful. Like if you're running multiple equipments and you draw a couple. And one thing that's not inconsequential here is that Ornn's signature cards are also equipments. And we'll talk about, I forgot we do have the signature things to talk about. So Ornn Blacksmith is good. I actually think he's better than the blue Ornn that is really scary and has like multiple deflects and doubles units. But you're likely to play both. Ornn likes his cards, and his cards interact well with his legend ability. So, some pretty good stuff. And it interacts with the equipment that I'm going to talk about next, which I'm pretty sure is a meme that a lot of people are going to try to do stuff with. Spellsonger is 3 energy, 1 calm rune. You can equip it for 1 and a calm rune, and it has +0. And what it does is it actually copies the text box of whatever you equip it to. Evidently, people have been thinking about equipping this to blue Ornn to make it like a deflect 4 +2 equipment. Or like it adds another deflect 2, and Ornn has +1 for each equipment. Or I think it's each gear actually. So you're like, people are like, oh, I can just like equip all my Spellsongers to Ornn to have like this giant battering ram that's basically untargetable. I will say to that, if somebody ever plays a Call the Week and you only have Ornn out, you're not going to be happy. And I think there are some other strategies where Spellsonger is going to see some interesting potential plays. Purple Yasuo, Green Ari, like there are a lot of abilities that look interesting to be copied. And so I'm going to reserve assessing Spellsonger because I think on its face, it doesn't look strong enough to protect units, and therefore is like a bit of a risky gamble. But let's say you do equip this to like Ornn, so you draw it with Ornn's ability, and then you equip it to him, and you pay that, like the cost to play it with Ornn, the Ornn Legend, and then you equip it for 1, and then all of a sudden Ornn can hold, and you get to look at the top 4 cards of your ability, pick an equipment, and then do it again. It can get pretty out of control. Um, I I think this wants like some really bomby abilities, and so there's some real like watch me assemble my ion cannon energy to this card. But I would be lying if I said that I don't want to play this. I think I'm gonna play this and I'm gonna lose, and I'm probably gonna have like a couple of matches that are very funny. Now, are there other legends that are already existing that you do want to play this with? I think Spellsonger with like Green Yasuo is pretty scary. Like getting to hammer people twice for his might. Like you go in, you can hit two things for 6 or one thing for 12 if people aren't interacting. That's pretty scary. Irelia gets like another deflect and a more buff. That's fine. It's not terrible. I just think it's a bit more memey, and especially like if people are like finding ways to go around it, I think it's a bit less relevant. And then Tiana Crown Guard. So Tiana Crown Guard is 4 might for 7 energy and 2 runes. It has deflect and another deflect. While I'm at a battlefield, opponents can't score points. I think Tiana Crown Guard has exactly one deck it wants to be in, and that deck is Hook, which implies that you're playing green, yellow Hook, which so far has been the home of Leona, but there may be a Hook variant of Azir that is doable. I like this card only for that deck. I think it's really hilarious to like really hold onto a point and block your opponent from the other one. At 4 might, it's pretty low to the ground, and so it shares the feature with a lot of the units that Hook likes finding, which is like they have high costs but low mites and crazy good effects. Incidentally, this also blocks opponents from scoring non-battlefield points. So Renata, I think, has ways to score points, and there's probably like a Renata Heimerdinger deck that's gonna pop up. It just locks that out. It locks Green Ari. If somebody's just moving a Yasuo back and forward, it locks that, and it locks the red Tryndamere that no one's playing. It basically also can equalize. So let's say you like hook this on, like you move a unit onto a battlefield, you hook it, you got the point, then you play this, then you can like move it back in depending on what you want to do with it. Hook plays to battlefield. Me having to look up a bunch of cards. I should have had like another thing open. Kill battlefield. May play. Yeah, there's no restriction. So you can play Tiana directly onto a battlefield, provided you have another unit that's there, so that it's a legal, like it's a legal battlefield that you own. This card's kind of spicy. 4 might deflect is also like really solid, off of like a 3 body. So I reserve the right to be wrong, but Tiana looks to me like a card that is going to like really produce a home for Hook in green decks and a reason to play it. And I do like that a lot. And then we're on to some of the signatures that are left over. So let's talk about the signatures for the heroes of today. Ornn. So Ornn has 3 signatures, and all of his signatures can only be played as a 1 copy inside of his deck. So evidently, Green Ornn is super useful for finding specific versions of these. And the signatures are, in general, really strong, if situational. So Ornn has like a toolboxy nature that I think has generally been good in most card games. All 3 of them cost 4 energy and 2 runes. So let's go through them one by one. And they equip for 1 cost of anything, but evidently if you play and equip them on the same turn, Ornn will, give you back 1 rune. If you do it on separate turns, Ornn can give you back 2 runes. So Fortifier Cape, 3 might. When I attack or defend, deal 2 damage to all enemy units here. Great. It's a +3, which is already strong. And unlike Sterex Gauge, I feel like this actually provides more uses. And when it attacks or defends, it also just blasts enemies. So you can't easily push like 2 mites unit onto this. It also hits before, so it's, you know, theoretically like a +5. That doesn't like raise your might by +5. Yeah, I mean, Forge Fire is great. What do you want me to tell you? It's like a functional +5 that like also has AoE for multiple like token strategies, and can really pile on a lot of damage. And then if the unit that was wearing it dies, you still keep the cape. Okay, let's do that then. Rabadon's Death Crown, +3. Your spells and abilities deal +3 damage while this is attached. Notably, the unit that has this attached does not have to be at a battlefield. Now, green has not been a color that can field a lot of damage removal. I think Rabadon's is really going to shine with the blue side of the spells, which have some interaction with Ornn. In particular, there is a spell that deals 1 damage to 3 different units. That becomes like 4 damage to 3 different units. That's crazy. There's also like I think there's like a hidden spell that deals damage. So Rabadon's is certainly gonna just see inclusion inside of Ornn, and you're gonna be happy drawing this if you're playing that deck. If that deck is really out of favor, like if the damage components just aren't playable in Ornn, then this is likely not going to be mainboarded. I might see a situation where this is sideboarded along with those spells for very specific matchups, but I just like this. I think it's like a solid card. And then the third one, Shirelia's Requiem, +2, so it's the lowest of the 3, and your units here have ganking. So it gives ganking to the unit that you're applying it to, but it also gives ganking to all of the units that were somewhere. So you could reasonably imagine you are on a battlefield and you can't back up your units, but you have to go conquer the other battlefield. So you just play Shirelia's and you equip it to one of the units that's already there, giving it a +2 and giving your whole board ganking. That seems good. It's really to like effectively give units like a +1 movement and also some extra power. And then sometimes you'll just play it for the +2 and still be happy and use the ganking. It's one-sided ganking, which is always good. Like people are playing Windswept Bastion just to have ganking on all their units. This gives it to you and only you. I like it. I think of the 3, I would say like Forge Fire is my favorite and I think is generically the best. Rabadon's requires some more stringent deck building, but is also very good. And then Shirelia's is a bit more. It's not like you don't have to put it in the sideboard, but its uses are slightly more narrow. And so I think you're reasonably happy playing all 3. And Green Ornn's ability lets you cycle the ones that you don't need, which is something. Then we have Jax's signature Counterstrike. 2 mana or 2 energy, 1 rune, reaction. Choose a unit. Next time that unit would be dealt damage this turn, prevent it and draw 1. Well, so it targets things and it draws you cards, which is already scary with things like Dreaming Tree. We're going to start with that. And then it's a functional 2 energy counter spell that will prevent any instance of damage. So it's not good against small instances, but it's good against big instances, and especially like single damage big instances of spells. So like if an opponent plays a Void Seeker and you play Counterstrike, you're happy. But the thing that is more interesting to me is that it doesn't just prevent damage from spells, it prevents all instances of damage. So you can play this as a reaction to like Darius Trifarian getting pushed in with like a cleave, and all of a sudden it prevents the damage, and the Darius takes counter damage. Maybe it dies, but if it doesn't die, it still gets pushed back and it cancels that attack entirely. Counterstrike's good, and to my point from last week, this is true for Ornn, but it's true for Jax as well. Like champions that tend to require all 3 of their signature spells or signature cards tend to be expensive to build. I expect that Counterstrike will just be played as a 3 of, if for no other reason than it is like a functional combat spell that also doubles as a counter spell and draws you cards. Like what's not to love, really? Then we have Defiant Dance. So Defiant Dance is a bit strange to evaluate right now, and I'll talk about it when I'm on the purple side again. 1 energy, 1 rune, reaction, give a unit +2 and another unit -2. So it's a 4 might swing for 1 energy, but 1 additional rune. This is like on guard on crack. And if you're playing the purple Aurelia, this can actually be hidden. If you're playing it on her, it reduces either the energy cost or the rune cost. And I think a lot of people I've been talking to are like, well, you play this and you don't pay the rune, and that's great. I think this is a lot scarier in the situation where you do not hold up runes and all of a sudden your opponent's like, I'm good. I'm going to run into your unit and kill it. And you, for 0 cost, cast this as a +2/-2 that also targets your units and probably has interaction with other stuff that likes being targeted. It likes deflect units that will like punish your opponents for targeting them anyways. It's just such a big swing. Like 4 energy is massive. Obviously, it's not 4 energy on 1 unit, so it doesn't like make a unit indestructible to removal. But there are situations where you're going to enjoy the -2 somewhere else a bit better, and you can target a unit anywhere, and you can also target another unit anywhere. So it's one of the -2s that hits base. One of the questions I have with this is this does not specify to a minimum of 1. And if that's not an errata, this means that it can kill 2 might units in base at reaction speed, which is really scary. Yeah, somebody, I'm curious if there's going to be some discussion about this. Minus effects like this that don't specify like a minimum of 1, I don't think there's been any that I can remember right now. Like Smoke Bomb, I think, is to a minimum of 1. Stupefy, I think theoretically we're in. Listen, I've been looking at a lot of cards today. We can. God, why am I on this website? God, I just need a Stupefy. Thank you. Minimum of 1. So that will be like a consequential part of this whole situation, is that Aurelia does give like that if that works that way, it's even better than I gave it credit for. And I do not see a world where you don't want to play 3 of these. On Guard is played as a 3, and this is just better for my money. Yeah, you're paying 1 rune, which is it's a lot, but yeah, I like it. And then the final card, and again from my boy Azir, is Arise. 6 energy, 1 rune, and you get a 2 might sand soldier for each equipment you control, and you ready 2 of them. And all of them auto-equip weapons. Drawing like multiple of these when you don't have equipments feels really bad. Because they effectively have no targets, but you are going to be running a lot of equipment. Now the question is, if I play this and I have 3 equipments, and I equip all three of them to sand soldiers, and then I ready 2 of those and I send them to battle, am I happy? The answer is yes. So at 0 equipment, this card is catastrophic. At 1 equipment, it's pretty bad. At 2 equipment, it's also not fun. 3 is great, and anything above that is gravy. Like 4 or 5, you just get like sand soldiers that are on standby. Yeah. I like this a lot. It also doesn't play them to base, so if you want to play them onto a battlefield you control for a holding strat, you can also do that. I don't think this is like a 3 of, ever. It may be a 1 of and 1 in the side kind of situation, but I think when you draw this and when you play it, it's going to feel really strong. And it's sort of like a different kind of closer than something like Grand Stratagem, where Grand Stratagem really levies your your like small tokens. This actually makes tokens for you. The big distinction is that it's not action speed. So you really do only use this on an open neutral board state in your turn and not in combat, which narrows its range of abilities and means I do like it less than I like Grand Stratagem in the decks that Grand Stratagems hits. So good, not amazing. Um, but this card will just close games sometimes. And there are equipments that like you are reasonably happy equipping this to. Like I'm getting ahead of myself. But for example, like Sacred Shears that gives Death Knell draw and +1, like equipping 2 of these and then getting your units to go kill like 2 3 cost units and then drawing you 2 cards, and the shears stay around, you can re-equip them. That's just great overall. So I like Arise. I don't think it's like crazy essential to have multiple of these, but you're gonna be when you play this and you have the right board for it, it's gonna feel like you're unstoppable for sure. And that ends the coverage for green for today. So I'm gonna swap back to my other presentation. So the calm cards, I think I like them overall, perhaps a bit less than I like the red cards. What I do think is important is that some of the green cards are really keen to open new archetypes and new homes. And the equipment is just like, there are 3 legends that want equipment. So obviously, cards like Doran's Shield are going to be like super important. So I'd like to talk about some of the cards that I think I have, are personal favorites of mine. And maybe you realize this when I was talking about them. I prepped this beforehand. So I think Emperor's Divide remains one of the cards that I think is going to be like really interesting and is going to provide support for multi-unit green strategies. But even if you're playing it for like 1 unit drawback, you're like happy, and you're gonna get some value out of this for sure. I like it. I'm gonna play it a lot in my Azir decks, and to that wit, Azir Ascendant. I think like the swap mechanic where he goes forwards and backwards is going to be really cool. He really messes with your opponent's capacity to target stuff reliably, and he can move equipment as well. I like him. I like Yasuo as well, so this is really my kind of card. The strength of Azir, I think, is really going to be in whether or not like people are running like mass equipment removal. But I like green and I like yellow as colors, and the fact that he's home to colors that can protect him well and that produce equipment, I'm in. Listen, Spellsmonger, it's on here. It's going to be on this list forever. I maintain that it's probably not going to be a good card, but you can't see this and in your heart of hearts not want to do some crazy stuff in the game. So I can't not put it on this list. And then Tiana Crownguard, I've been a pretty big proponent of hook decks, and I think hook decks in general have some potential for like some pretty explosive lockouts. I think swinging points is pretty cool, and Tiana also rewards like a pretty intensive hold strategy. I think the time of green yellow hook is not quite here yet. It might be, but I feel like we're missing like your super defensive green hold, like wide board kind of hero. So we'll see. Might be Azir, might be like a specific variant of Leona. I just think she's really cool and she does something that no other card does, which is like lockout points. And I'm a fan of that in this game. Especially if you're like against some greedy decks that just want to score around you. So there's like 4. But I think green is still shaping up to be like a really interesting color. I'm a bit concerned that like 3 out of its 4 new leaders want equipment, and that means very likely that one of them will become like the equipment higher tier leader based on performance. And I think Irelia is just playing like completely different game plans, so it's probably like Irelia and whoever of the other 3 is going to be good if equipment is good. But I think all 4 of them open new ways for green to play, and I think that's the most important part of this set is like diversifying strategies and opening up new stuff that's possible for calm decks. So like that's really like the same thing I was saying last week is like I want broadening directions. Like I want more options for play, and I think opening up something that isn't a direct damage deck or an Aurora deck is really valuable. So we'll see what that leads to. But you know, that's the case for Calm for now. Next episode, which is on Wednesday, is going to be the Darius in Focus. We're starting to catch up with these. I know some of you have been really patient with some of the heroes that are on the backlog. I'm trying to get to all of them at ASAP. I will be getting through all of them before Spiritforged is in our hands here in North America. But you know, it takes some time, and then we're doing these like, you know, Spiritforged card evals in between. So that's the plan for now. So Darius on Wednesday, and if my color, you know, like sequence is correct, that means Mind is up next Monday. You know, hopefully you're all having a great last couple of weeks before the holidays. You can get some rest in and spend some time with family. And you know, getting in some final Nexus nights before stores kind of go on break for the holiday season. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully this one isn't as full of issues with targeting as I had in my Fury video, but do let me know down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!